Hello everyone! In today's video I'm going to give you a tutorial on how to detail the exterior of your homes to add a little bit of extra character and pizzazz. We're going to focus on two main aesthetics, one more worn, well-loved build, and one more new, fresh build. So if you want to learn how to turn your builds from drab to fab, then make sure you grab yourself a drink, a snack, a blanket, get comfy, and let's get into it. Alright, so this is the shell we are working with. I'm going to be using the same shell for both the worn house and the new style of house, since this video is focused on detailing rather than the structural focus of a build. I want to show how the little details can add to the aesthetic you're trying to go for rather than just the shape of the house. So for a more worn, well-loved, well-lived-in home, we're going to see things like lower contrast and saturation, and also a bit more of an overgrown and dead aesthetic to the plants that we're going to be using for the landscaping. For a newer style of house, we're going to see things with higher contrast and higher saturation, so opposite of the worn house. And we're also going to see more of a maintained, lush sort of landscaping. So in order to make this a little bit easier to follow, I have broken it down into 4 main steps. I'll go ahead and put these steps up on the side there, and pretty much we are going to work our way from 2D objects to 3D objects, and just to give us a little bit of a sense of order. So first on the list is swatches. This is a fine house, I guess, but an easy way to add more interest to your house is by adding a secondary siding. So here we just have one siding all around, and since this is the worn house, we are going to go for more of a, distressed look and a, I guess, lived-in look. So I'm going to use this base game brick. It's called Pretty and Plaster, and it looks like there's been paint that's been added, then removed, and you can see like a texture of a brick. So that's going to work quite perfectly for what we're going for. And then next up, we're going to tackle the roof swatch. So this is just the base game default swatch that we get, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I want to add like a little bit of extra texture and whatnot, so I'm going to use the horse ranch one in this lighter swatch because, as I mentioned, older, more worn looking builds tend to be a little lower in contrast. See, if I were to use this dark one, it would look a little bit newer already, so we're going to stick with this one. And then I'm going to switch the roof trim to the steeped roof trim in a gray swatch. This will have it look a little more incomplete, I guess, but not incomplete in like where the build looks unfinished, but it just looks like a bit more of a raw edge on the roof, which I think works well for this aesthetic. And then we're also going to change the swatch of the foundation. There's really like so many options you could go with for the foundation. You could use this one, or maybe this one, or even this one if you wanted the siding to look like it was extended a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and use this one here. This is the 4th swatch, and I'm just going to put that around the whole build. We're not going to focus on the back of the build, I'm just going to show you the front so you can kind of get a general vibe, but all of these tips are applicable to like the whole house, And then next up we will do the swatch for the patio. It can just be like a simple kind of concrete like this, which could work really well, or we could go for more like a worn stone, maybe from Jungle Adventure. I think maybe we'll just go with this kind of decayed cement sort of look. And then we'll switch out the stairs. These ones right now are just like a wooden one, but I think I'll switch them to these mega stairs because these are more stone based. Like that's their texture a bit, and you can see they've kind of got like worn little edges there. Unfortunately there's no gray swatch, so we'll just stick with the white one, but already that's looking a lot better. And we can even go ahead and maybe change some of our window swatches. If I'm doing more of a worn house, sometimes I like to switch the windows to gray as I feel it makes them look a little bit more weathered, and so I think that's exactly what we will go with. So next on our list is 2D items, and what I mean by that is these little painting features. So we have a couple of different packs that come with these, I guess, little decals that make certain parts of like the wall look a little bit more decayed, or like there's drips and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and add those to the outside of the build to add a bit more of a rundown feel. So we can find some in werewolves under like this little scratch category, or there's a couple from the basement treasures kit. There's a bunch of them from For Rent and also from vampires as well, but I don't have vampires, so I'm just gonna stick with what I've got, which will work perfectly for this build. I'm going going to take this for rent one and put it on the brick. I like to make sure that these textures are kind of applied to where I think they would realistically show up. So like, I'm not going to put this brick texture where the wood is because that maybe doesn't make the most sense, but on a brick wallpaper it makes complete sense. So that's kind of my logic behind this, and I just kind of put it wherever I feel is necessary. After we do some of the landscaping or add more objects, we can kind of mess around with if anything needs to be changed. But I think just getting a general sense of a couple of scuff marks will work quite well. And I'll maybe also put some on the side. And also, if they're appearing too light, you can place it and hold shift and then just place more and it'll get a bit denser. But not all these swatches will work on all the wallpapers, so just keep that in mind. But I think this is probably pretty good. I might put one more little scuff on the baseboard here. Yeah, I think that works quite well. And then now that we have all the 2D assets accounted for, we're going to move on to the 3D items. So for the 3D items, there's a couple of different things you can put on here. I'll go ahead and put up a picture now of all the kind of exterior items that I tend to use the most, and I'll make sure to upload this room to the gallery so you guys can have easy access to it. I have some of the scuffs and scrapes that I've just added to the build on there, as well as like the 3D objects that I'm going to use. So I have the objects here and I'm just gonna kind of copy and paste them onto the house as I see fit. So the first thing I love to add is a drain pipe. These are from the Get Together expansion pack and they come in 3 different sizes. I'm gonna go with the longer version because it kind of tucks into the roof nicely, and I think I'm going to switch that into a green color just so it kind of sticks out a little bit more. And then the other thing I like to add is this air vent here. Sometimes I like to shrink it down if it's a little bit too large. I'm just gonna put that in the peak of the roof. And then one of my favorite things ever to add are these air conditioning units. So we have 2 options. We have one from Strangerville and one from For Rent. The For Rent one is actually functional if I'm remembering correctly, but I really like to use this one. This is its original size, but you can size it down using the bracket key and it's still functional. And then I'm just gonna slot it into the window like that. And what I love about this is it comes with a new swatch, but it also comes with a couple of worn swatches. So I'm going to use one of these. I think probably this one here. And already you can see that this build has a lot more character than where we started. So I think we are making good progress. Another thing I like to use is the wall mailbox, which we got from Snowy Escape. This isn't, I mean, necessary by any means. None of this is necessary. It's all, you know, personal preference and whatever's going to work for your build. You could use one of these standing ones, but I like that it adds a little bit of more interest onto the wall. And another thing I like to add for a little bit more detail is this little decal that we got from Cats and Dogs. It's meant to be like a word, but to me it kind of looks like numbers, so I like to add it above the mailbox as though it was a house number. Ignore the exclamation point, I guess. If you have Love Struck, you could use those, but I don't, so you know, I'm making do with what I have. And then another thing I like to add as like a 3D element is lighting. So I like to add a little porch light. You could put it on the side, you could put it above here. For me, I'm going to put it above the door just so there's not like 3 things stacked on top of each other. I like to add a little bit more variety here, and I'm just going to use this base game one. I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be an outside light or not, but I don't know. I think it works for what I'm going for, so I'm just going to keep it. And then I'm also going to add a piece of fencing to this patio here. So I just want to use this base game one because to me this feels very like standard and I guess lower budget, and that since that's the house we're building, I feel like it makes sense. We could put it in maybe a gray swatch instead to make it look a little bit more weathered, so we'll go with that. And then that's kind of good for the 3D objects on this middle part of the house, but you don't want to forget about the roof. So we're going to add some detail to the roof just to make it a bit more interesting, because this is fine, but we can make an even cooler silhouette by adding like a chimney, for example. So I'm going to use this one from, what is this from? Cottage Living. And I'm just going to slot that into the side there. And this swatch could work, but I think I'm going to go for more of a neutral swatch, just to kind of let the door be the star of the show. And then another thing I really like to add on my more well-loved builds is this satellite dish. This is from Strangerville. It just makes it feel so realistic to me. I'm also going to switch it to gray so it's less stark, again leaning into that low contrast thing. I'm just going to put it on the side there, and that already looks a lot cooler than this silhouette. So other things you could add could be like this flag post, which honestly really cute. Or if you have a flat roof, I like this heater from For Rent. Or you could add like a little dormer if you wanted, but I think in the interest of this is going to work perfect. Now that we have all of the 3D items sorted, we're going to move on to the last step, which is landscaping. So for landscaping for a worn build, we're gonna see more of this overgrown feel with maybe duller colors, less like vibrant greens and more like browns and you know, dull greens. So I really like using like stray grass pieces from various packs. We have some from Get Together, Cats and Dogs. Cats and Dogs offers you 2 varieties, like a dead one and a more lush one. Or Horse Ranch also has some good ones, so I'm just gonna go through and find a couple of grass pieces that I want to use, and then I will come back when the landscaping is done. Alright, so this is what I have going for the landscaping. I use, I think, like 5 different types of grasses just from the debug menu, a couple of bushes, then I use this ivy which we got from Cottage Living, or if you have Discover University, that should also have some ivy in the debug menu. And then I just added a couple more grass pieces and mushrooms on the side here. And then to finish off the build, we are going to add some terrain paint just to make it look a little bit more polished and complete. So I'm going to use this dark dirt, and I'm just going to put that under all the landscaping. And I'm going to adjust the softness a little bit so it's a little less blunt over here. And then we're also going to add a little pathway. I like to use the gravel one for, I guess, lower income homes, just because it seems kind of like realistic to me and I like the texture of it. So I mean, there's no real direction for this house, so I'm just going to put like a general path like that. So that completes our worn build. I did end up adding a little deck chair which we got from For Rent onto the porch just for a little bit of extra something. And yeah, so it's very distressed, well loved. We got a couple of different scuffs and scrapes here and there, and I think this is the perfect way to showcase like a more well-loved lower income household. Next, we are going to move on to the newer aesthetic of home. So one's going to be a lot more polished and more like it was built recently rather than it's been sitting around for a couple years or decades. So again, we're going to follow the same steps, which I will put up once again on the side there for you to follow. And we're just going to start with the swatches. So instead of using a more distressed brick, there's this base game brick we can use here called the Ornate Brick. And I'm just going to use it in white and put it on the same spot that I did for the worn house. Already you can see that between just the 2 different wallpapers, we get a completely different feel. So this one feels a lot more like new, modern, and polished, whereas this one feels a bit more decrepit. And so next we're going to do the roofing. I could use the same roof paint that I used on the other one, which honestly maybe I'll do just to prove my point of like lower versus higher contrast. So I'm going to use the Horse Ranch one again, but in black. And then for the roof trim, I like the one that I have because it feels a bit more polished, instead of using this one here like I did on the other house. So we will stick with this one. This is just the 3rd one in, and I think I will probably keep it in white. You could do it in black if you wanted, but I feel like the contrasting trim is something that makes homes feel a little bit more new, I guess. And we're also going to change the foundation. I want to go for a couple of different red brick accents, so I think I'm going to go with a red brick foundation for this house. And then we're going to do the porch, which again I think I want to be red brick. There's a couple of different options, but I think I'm gonna go with this black one here and switch it to this red version. And I'm gonna have the bricks going this way because when I change the staircase to brick, it's gonna line up a little bit better than if I had it going in that direction. Now that we have all the swatches done, I'm going to move on to the 2D objects again. And unlike the last house, we're not going to see as many scuffs or scrapes. You don't have to add any if you don't want to, but I still like my homes to have a little touch of realism to it, I guess. So instead of it being completely pristine, I might add like one little scrape on the side there. And maybe instead of the scrape, we'll do just like a little bit of dirt. I don't want to do anything too crazy though, because I still want the house to feel a bit more polished compared to the other one. But I am going to use the same house number situation just on the side here. And that kind of completes our 2D elements. So moving on to the 3D elements, I'm once again going to reference this little board here. So I don't think I want to use any of these air conditioning units or anything like that. I like the idea of this hanging flower pot, but I'm going to show you one from Debug that I actually think works a little bit better. But we are going to go ahead and add these planter boxes here. These are just base game ones and they're one of my favorite ones to use, and I think I'm going to use them in red just to add a nice little bit of unison between the door and the planters. And instead of using this vent situation, I'm actually going to add another window up on the top here, so we could go for something square, but I don't think that uses up the space the best, so I'm actually going to take this half window, which we got from Cats and Dogs, and just put it up here. And then one other way you can make it feel a bit more polished is by adding columns to the outside. So with this, you add like a little bit of extra dimension, and it also makes the wallpaper feel a bit more finished. So we have this column here, which is from Get Together, or we have this one from Snowy Escape, and these are kind of your best options for just a simple rectangular column. I'm going to use the Snowy Escape one because I like the little bit of texture and wornness it has without looking completely wonky. So we're going to use that and just put it around the build. I'm just going to put it on every corner of the build here, and then I would also probably put it here to, you know, polish off the divide between the two wallpapers. And I think for this house I will still add a drain pipe just for, you know, another element of interest, I suppose, but we won't make it as noticeable as the other one. And I think for this one we will also go ahead and use a mailbox, but instead of putting it on the front here, I'm going to use one of these standing ones. I think I'll just go with this base game one here. I think it's pretty cute. And then we'll also need a fence of sorts. I'm thinking for this house, since it's got that more newly renovated or recently built kind of feel, I'm gonna go with the growing together fence, and I'm going to use it in white rather than gray just for, again, the more polished look. And I believe there is a matching railing for it, so I'll use that on these stairs because that looks a bit more complete, and I'll just move the mailbox to adjust it. And then in terms of final decorations that I want to add for this middle portion of the build, I want to put in some of these planter pots. These are from the base game Debug, and we can find them. I'm using the Better Build and Buy mod, so this just organizes Debug for me and makes it easy to duplicate and find things because it automatically categorizes items. I always have this linked in the description in case you were curious. So I'm going to use this planter here and this hanging one as well. So I'm going to take this and put it on the porch, but I'm going to size it down using my left bracket key. And then holding Alt, I'm just going to freely place it a little bit. And then with the hanging planter, I'm going to raise it using Ctrl 9 and just kind of make it look like it's slotted into the roof there. And already that looks super cute and a lot more polished than, say, the decor over here. Now that we have the middle portion figured out, we're going to tackle the roof. So for this roof, I'm not going to do anything crazy because it's supposed to be more of a like manicured home, I guess. So I'm just going to use the same chimney, but instead I will keep it in the red swatch. And I won't do any satellite dish or anything because I don't see that really suiting this house. And with all of those 3D items sorted, we can go ahead and move on to the landscaping. So like I mentioned earlier, for the landscaping for a newer style of home, or I guess a more well-kept style of home, we're going to see more maintained and manicured landscaping. So I'm just going to use one of these bushes here. This one's from Cottage Living Debug, but there should be like a base game version if you wanted to use that. Or there's this one here which could work really well, but I'm going to focus on keeping a bit more of a vibrant feel. I really like to use these low-lying pale flowers as kind of the base for my hedge to sit in. I just feel like it's a nice little secondary element. Now you can use the ones that are like purchasable, like the ones you can actually find in the build and buy catalog, or you could use a debug version if you wanted to. The debug versions tend to have like kind of different tones to them and such. I actually like these growing together ones, so I'm going to go ahead and use those. Yeah, just kind of lay it out a little bit like that. You could put a couple of different like vibrant flowers if you wanted, but I kind of like just the simple greenery that this has. And then similarly to the other house, I'm gonna use this ivy again because I feel like the ivy can work for a newer home or an older home. I think it's really just up to personal preference, but something like that, just simple manicured landscaping, is going to work really well. And lastly, we're just going to go ahead and add the terrain paint to polish up this build. I'm going to use this brick one here. Again, this is just base game, and I'm just going to make like a little semicircle since there's no real direction for this build to go. All right, and that completes the newer, more manicured home. We have higher contrast items, a bit more thoughtfully placed items, and a bit more vibrant manicured landscaping. So these are the final homes that we ended up with. We have our more well-loved build over here with all its scuffs and scrapes and kind of chaotic landscaping and lower contrast items. And then on the right here, we have the more manicured, newly built, fresher home with, you know, higher contrast items and a bit more thoughtfully placed things. Alright everyone, that is going to be it for today's tutorial. I really hope you found it helpful and maybe picked up on a couple of different tips or tricks that you didn't know about, and I hope that this helps you realize that it's pretty easy to detail and all these tips can be applied to any type of style. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any other tutorials or builds you want to see me do, make sure you leave it in the comments down below and I will try my best to make it happen. And also make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see some future content, and hopefully I will see you all in my next video. Bye guys.